Welcome everyone to another author interview. With me today is Steve Kromer, a seasoned professional in the field of measurement and verification. We are discussing his new book, The Role of the Measurement and Verification Professional, Judgment and Decision Making in the Application of M&V. And with me is also Lori from AEE. Lori?
Thank you for letting me co-host with you, Anna. My name is Laurie Beth, and I'm the marketing manager at the Association of Energy Engineers, otherwise known as AEE. If you're not familiar with AEE, it's a membership organization that serves your needs for networking, education, and certification for the energy industry. We have over 17,000 members and 32,000 certified individuals in over 105 countries worldwide. If you'd like to know more about AEE, you can visit our website at aeecenter.org.
So this is the first book to be published under the AEE Press banner, with many more books coming in the future. AEE Press, an imprint of River Publishers, will publish titles that cover all aspects of energy, with many of them focusing on being foundational references for AEE certifications. So let's talk about this first book then, Steve. Can you share with us your journey and experience in the field of measurement and verification, and what inspired you to become involved in this area of energy management?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Lori Beth. It's great to be here. And thanks to AEE. Indeed, this is designed, this book, to support the CMVP, the Certified M&V Professional Certification. And that's, going backwards, something that's been in place for something like 20 years. And that 20 years has been a partnership with other industry partners to come up with rules and methods that are standardized across the industry for quantifying the impacts of all the work that the AEE engineers do. So going back to the beginning, M&V, measurement and verification, is about quantifying the impacts of energy management generally. And my start in that was working actually in buildings, metering them for various studies to learn how they were using energy, and then working in a place called Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, where we were the pilot program for a federal program that wanted to figure out how to finance energy improvements. So we started to bring in this idea of financing. In order to finance a project, you needed to know how much you got from the results. So energy management's pretty straightforward. You put in new light bulbs when the technology changes, or you fix buildings that are not working properly. And the question becomes, how much does it cost to invest to do that? And then how much did you get? So I ended up getting an opportunity to take a lead on developing those standards. And for the next 30 years, I've been working with those standards, teaching people about those standards, watching the world change around us. Whereas now, back then we did a lot of performance contracting. Now there's a lot of programs, utility programs, and all kinds of new ESG, carbon trading, all kinds of new things. So my journey has pretty much been along the lines of an engineering quantification background, trying to assist people to understand how these quantification tools work, really, what's possible, and how best to go about communicating that with others. That's the real difference in this book, and what we changed the tone of the class is towards how are you a professional to perform M&V? What things do you need to know to work with other people across the spectrum to actually get your jobs accomplished?
Steve, I know you just mentioned some of these examples, but can you elaborate on what motivated you to write The Role of the Measurement and Verification Professional, Judgment and Decision Making in the Application of M&V, and elaborate a little bit about who the intended audience is?
Sure. Well, again, Lori Beth, AEE has been, probably the most important organization in the country for generating knowledge and networking individuals who are in energy management in the field, actually doing it on the ground. And so when 20-something years ago, I was actually the chair at the time. I wasn't the chair at exactly that time, but a couple of years later, there was a group called Efficiency Evaluation Organization, and we had this standard called the IPMVP. And the IPMVP was the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol. And we built that thing along with the FEMP protocol, Federal Energy Management Program protocol, to allow people to do performance contracting. And again, energy management's great, but you have to find a way to finance it. So either you self-finance it, or you get a contract in place where you finance these efforts and you pay people off from how much you saved. So I was involved in developing that protocol, and it became obvious that it's really important to inform a lot of people, not just the technical techniques of how to do M&V, but also how to communicate what we're doing across a broad spectrum of people. That's the professional role. So after 20-something years of doing that, we AEE a couple of years ago embarked on a new program for the CMVP, focusing on professional communication, focusing on the technical professional skills. And the technical skills have to follow. You need technicians, you need people to do it, but you really, I've found after teaching for 20 years too, the most exciting insights people get is when they really recognize how these tools and methods work. And that's, for the last 20 years, then witnessing that. What we've got now, though, is this big change coming where the targets are a big part of energy policy versus savings quantification. And so, again, the genesis of this book was to open up that world to people. Where are we in this evolution of M&V methods, and where are we going? And how are all the different various tools and techniques going to be needed to be put together in the future? So people that come to this class or read this book, or both, right, hopefully, will have a real good picture of what's coming in the future and be able to talk to people about it and be a professional in the industry.
Great. So in your book, you discuss fundamental concepts underpinning M&V methods. Could you provide some insights into these foundational principles and their significance in the context of energy management?
Sure. Again, so yeah, thanks. So energy management, basically does really simply one of two things. You've got existing systems that are using energy for some purpose, and you can go in and swap out equipment and put it into equipment, and you can say if the new equipment works, you can say, I've improved the efficiency of the building, I can manage energy better. And in that sense, there's a role for M&V, which is called performance verification. And you can just say, what was the old piece of equipment? Did it have a performance metric to it, like miles per gallon? Can I tune it up and come up with a new miles per gallon? So one foundational part of M&V is just being able to quantify performance before and after and see if you've improved it with your methods. This can be generalized across a wide range of ECMs, or energy conservation or energy savings measures, energy efficiency measures, energy management measures, but performance measurement. And yeah, so that's key. It's pretty simple. It's really straightforward. And we called it option A in the protocols. The other thing, this is where it's challenging. And I think one of the most important things in this book is that we're opening up really, I hope clearly, this concept of when you try to go to a secondary level of measuring the impact or quantifying the impact of an energy management project, you necessarily have to deploy something called the counterfactual method. And that word sounds a little confusing the first time you hear it. But what that does is it says, in order to understand how much you're impacting this energy management is impacting a system, you have to quantify the existing system, the baseline. And then you have to update that baseline in the future. And it's really straightforward. You both are nodding. It's really easy. Conceptually, it's called counterfactual. What would have happened if I hadn't done the measure? And what that means, a little more detail, is you have to build a model of the existing system. So the baseline you characterize in a model. So M&V is really the part of quantifying savings, all about characterizing the existing system in a model and then updating that model in the reporting period and comparing to what actually happens. So it's actually fundamentally really simple. And it turns out there's a lot of other industries that do the same thing. So a lot of the tools and techniques and math and statistics that are available for us and what we use in energy management are the same across econometrics and science, basically. So, and with the evolution of how AI and machine learning and all these tools, there's a vast community of people we can be drawing on to do the counterfactual stuff. So back to your original question, yeah, there's the two fundamental things are performance verification and then counterfactual or savings quantification. And we have to cover both of them. But one final thing, though, again, policies in the past have pushed both, but have been, more recently in utility programs and performance contracting, they push the savings side. How do you quantify the amount you've saved? A lot of future policies are going towards targets, and it's building performance standards and net zero and things where you say, is it working properly now? And can I characterize that? So that's a change we're seeing in terms of the fundamental approaches being used in policies out there.
One of the key aspects you address is the review of common M&V guidelines and protocols. Can you explain these guidelines, how they align and differ, and why it's essential for professionals to understand the nuances?
Sure. So the various languages that people have come up with to describe this specific application of a scientific method, performance verification or savings to energy management, have taken different flavors, basically. And so different groups over time gotten together and written standard ways of doing it. And to some degree, they've had different perspectives on it. So let me just lay that out. If you take the perspective that the results of energy management are something that are shared between the parties in a contractual arrangement, that specifies a context. So the context is the performance contract, and the protocols that are written for that have to address who's responsible for the measure, who's responsible for operating. There's numerous things within the protocols in a performance contract that are specific to that. So the FEMP protocols are probably the best example of that. They are specifically written to match the needs of the federal program, the procurement officers, all the various things involved in procuring energy impacts, energy. I don't think I use the word savings too much, but energy impacts and energy management in federal facilities. FEMP does that. You know, when the IPMVP was written, it was to be a more general characterization of the types of methods that were available. So whole facility, isolation, or performance verification. So it's supposed to be very general, and it could be catered to whatever needs you had. But it was a very general set of instructions, basically. And then you had ASHRAE, which is like probably the third and the other biggest one people know about, ASHRAE Guideline 14, which specifically aims at a more scientific approach to not looking at the responsibility of the parties, but saying, can we scientifically exactly say what happened here? Which is ironic. It's interesting. There's a lot of great technical stuff in ASHRAE 14. But if you don't take into consideration the responsibilities of the parties, sometimes you're missing the real meat of the subject. Like how do you attribute these impacts to whom, doing what? So the scientific perspective is really what drives a lot of utility programs, and a lot more general who just want a big wide picture of what's happening in a region, so to speak, not understanding who's underlying who's doing what. Yeah, so the protocols generally each have their own particular purpose. They all reside in a particular context. So back to our book and to the CMVP, the first thing the CMVP has to know is, what's my context? Am I in a contract? Am I in a utility program? Am I in a carbon trading? And then talk to the people there about how to apply which protocols are relevant.
So your book also highlights technical issues and areas requiring judgment in M&V projects. Can you elaborate on some of these challenges and how professionals can navigate them?
Sure. So, and it's a nice segue from the protocol. So if you've got a well-developed and mature program where all the rules are laid out, you're going to reduce the amount of judgment required. And that's, for a lot of engineers, frankly, that's a nice calming feeling. Like, just give me the checklist. Let me know what to do. I'll go make the calculations. And that's great. And I do a lot of that myself. And I come up with, check sheets and it's systematic and there's a rhythm to it. And people like that. And, yeah, that's out there. But what the truth is, to actually perform M&V well, you've often got to make a lot of judgments along the way. So the world doesn't behave for us just so we can do M&V. Things change, things don't fit together, things occur in the baseline that aren't going to occur later. Picking the right model, picking the right scale for the model, the measurement boundary, the whole building versus isolating something, and then determining how much to spend on M&V. An unfortunate fact of M&V in execution in the field is it costs money. And good people cost a lot of money. And so you never can do as much evidence collection and M&V analysis as you want. So you've got to make judgments, and all the parties have to agree. They're not going to know exactly what's happening out there. They're going to have to live with limited information. So in many ways, an M&V professional has to be able to use judgment to work with all the parties involved to optimize the M&V plan, execute that plan, keep everyone informed along the way. We talk about now that M&V is expectation management. M&V is dispute avoidance. It's really about the human soft skills of saying, for a limited budget, here's the information we can collect. We'd like to do more, but we probably don't want to spend a lot of money on it. So how are we all going to make that balance point? And that's really judgment based. And that's soft skills of communicating those judgments.
Steve, M&V has been described as both an art and a science. Could you elaborate on this concept and how professionals can balance technical tasks with effective communication to ensure project success?
Sure, that's sort of an elaboration on the last point, but yeah, I think I love this. The first motto is begin with the end in mind. So what's the end in mind in energy management? So again, we have this great thousands, like you said, thousands of skilled people who can go to the field and do cool things and change out light bulbs, or we have thousands of people involved in developing new technologies. And we have all kinds of control systems and HVAC and all this great stuff we can do. And the question is, how do you afford to do that? Who pays for it? And what justification? So if the justification is up front saying, well, we just think it's a good idea, sure, go buy it. Right? You just go do it and buy it. But you still probably want evidence that it worked. And the degree to which any party wants that evidence, the the degree to which they're satisfied that it worked is different. So the art is really figuring out what situation am I in? Is it in a program, a contract, or just working for a particular firm? We have a lot of people come to the CMVP class now that work for firms that have large amounts of facilities, and they want to know how do I know if I got what I'm paying for, even though they're using their own money. So the question is, you figure that out first. What's going to satisfy someone? And in some cases, that's a chief financial officer, a CFO, or a CEO, or an engineer. But really, you need to learn your audience up front. So once you've got your audience, you can say, what would convince you that this project worked? Here are the protocols. Here's the tools we have: performance verification or counterfactual, build a model. Would you be happy with that? Once you've assessed what people will be happy with, you can back up and say, okay, now here's a systematic way we can make that technical and repeatable. Here's the information we're going to collect, how we're going to update it, so everyone can agree all the way through the process. So yeah, the answer is that being a professional in this industry is recognizing that you've got to convince someone at the end of your project that the number you came up with is the right number. Okay, critical point for M&V. That amount is the absence of something. Our whole business in M&V is quantifying the absence of energy. And that's just, it's either funny or it's there's something creative about that. Unfortunately, it can be too creative, because if you don't do it right, if you don't have all parties understanding, you can create the appearance of savings out of nothing, right? So that's where I'm creating trust all the way through with all the parties, that you're following a valid method, that all parties have access to all the information. That's really what M&V is all about.
So your book also emphasizes the importance of practical application and real-world scenarios. Can you share any anecdotes or examples from your own experience that illustrate the principles discussed in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first order, you want to get the system right. You want to get the method set up right, and you want people to understand it and communicate it. And then all the real work happens, which is you have to go collect the data. Okay, you have to go make sure you get access to the data. Can you do that? That's a practical consideration. Will the party give it to you? I had an experience this morning where I had a small utility on the East Coast that just sent me the data. I couldn't do that in California. It would take me a year to get building data and permissions and NDAs and all that stuff. So there's some practical considerations about, can I get the data? Can I access the site? If I get into the site, do I have the right metering for the scale of the pieces of equipment there? If I have the right equipment there, do I actually collect the data, get it back to my computer? Can I analyze it? I think in my book, there's like 27 sub-chapters on practical considerations, all of them requiring skill and technical skill. And it's like any construction project, like you have the architect who says, here's our vision. And then you have all the skilled people within that to do the technical work. And that's all the practical considerations. Just some more though are, all right, so I've got the energy savings or the energy impacts maybe quantified using my tools. What are they worth? How do I apply a tariff to that? How do I get people to agree to how I calculated the value from that? Another practical consideration that's pretty important. How do I deal with events that happened in the baseline that aren't going to happen again? How do I make judgments for that and remove that impact from the calculation? So yeah, the book starts with a whole chapter on the concepts, goes through the contexts about where things are happening and how to understand that. And then it goes into protocols that are written that are all good, but imperfect. And then it goes through like 27 areas of practical considerations, any one of which could be a separate course or book. Oh, and by the way, AEE has a bunch of books on these individual topics, right? Supporting M&V are a whole library of other books that you can go get into the practical considerations and speak with experts about that particular part.
Well, now we'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about the future of M&V. So in your opinion, what are some emerging trends or developments in the field of M&V that professionals should be aware of, and how do you foresee the shaping of the future of energy management?
Yeah, sure. So what I see from my desk and from teaching in the classes, it's been an evolution, and an evolution means that some of the older ideas are still relevant, but maybe aren't probably going to survive a whole lot longer into the future. And it's not exactly clear how long. So if we're talking about M&V and we're talking about what's written in the existing protocols, again, it's one of two things: performance verification. Instantaneous, is the thing working now? Is it better or worse than before? Or accumulating savings over time using the counterfactual method, which is a model. All right, what we got now, those two concepts worked in a world where the baseline existing energy consumption in most facilities was fairly stable. You could go to a site, school district, government building, a commercial building, take a year's worth of data, And there's a meter, the building used energy. You could quantify that, go get the utility to give you the data, and then do your intervention. And then a year or two afterwards, you could go back and compare what happens afterwards to what would have happened. Well, now what we've got is in real time, our energy transition is happening around us. And everywhere I go, there's an existing system, but now there's a storage being put onto it, electrical storage maybe. There's demand response. There's photovoltaics going on the roof. There's demand response programs that are saying turn off your energy every third day on a random schedule. So we don't have that stable baseline we used to have. So one implication of that is in order to do this counterfactual method for quantifying impacts, we have to adjust all the time for things that weren't in the baseline period. And anyone that's done M&V for very long knows that adjustments, they cause problems, they cause potential disputes. So they've got to be planned for, and a lot more changes are coming to every operating facility. So the modeling is going to have to get a lot more sophisticated. Simulation modeling is the physical modeling where you go in and you quantify the actual underlying elements of a building. We're going to have to get much better at that. And fortunately, with AI, I think we're going to be able to. So I'm looking for a lot coming with AI and building modeling that's going to allow us to run digital twins to perform this counterfactual method. It's sophisticated. It's right now still expensive. But we see how AI is evolving so quickly that potentially we have digital twins everywhere. We can perform this method. Everyone will agree to it. Right. So the future, what we really hope in the future is that AI and energy simulation modeling will come together in a way that allows us to use digital tools to perform this counterfactual method if and when this quantification of savings is called for. It'll have to adapt for, again, photovoltaics, electrical vehicles, storage, and all these other things. But I think it's possible. I think it's actually going to come no matter what. So we'll see that. But the other, I think, potentially more important and impactful to our programs in energy management is the idea that there's targets out there. And this is in the whole realm of net zero and policies and programs outside of contracts. Utility programs, government programs worldwide, the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of dollars going out there, and they're going to be evaluated based on impacts, and they're going to say, how are we doing that? And there's lots of people lining up, whether it's IRA or carbon or ESG, what will be sustainability rules that people will follow? And I have numerous websites lined up now and conferences happening, summits all over the country on how to do that. And it's a lot of things called targets. It's a lot of targets, and targets are different. Of course, energy management will have to happen to meet a target, but when you're done, you will have an EUI, an energy use index per year or some sort of thing. I've met my target. But meeting a target is really different than amassing savings over time. And that's something I think a challenge that's coming in the future that we all want to be aware of. And really right now, important, I hope this book helps, and I hope the class helps. We teach people, go out and communicate across these summits. I think in general, people don't understand M&V. They think it's mysterious and just some sort of magic. And when they learn how it really works, I think that helps them understand the trade-offs between going for savings quantification, impact quantification versus targets, and which one works well where. They both can be useful, but I see a whole lot of policies coming near in the future that are leading us more towards targets. And that's just something we have to be aware of.
Okay, so thank you very much. That sounds very exciting. As a last question, maybe what do you hope readers will take away from your book, and how do you envision it impacting the field of M&V?
Sure, thanks. Well, you hope, I guess, late in your career that you've learned some things that didn't stand out earlier. And when we are able to transition the AEE class on CMVP and start from scratch, we're going to take into consideration a lot of these things we just talked about. And that is that M&V as a technique and set of tools is really linked to a lot of the same techniques are used a lot across a lot of other industries. So if you're in this industry, don't focus just on energy, but go to the internet and talk to people doing all kinds of other things in science that are using tools to estimate impacts, using modeling and whatnot. There's lots of other people available. So I'm hoping this book is like a link to help people understand our processes are not unique to energy management. They do work for us, but they're able to understand these processes better. They can go bring in more talent from other areas and communicate what these processes are. It's not magic. It's something that once everyone understands the fundamentals, you're much more likely to get to successful settlement, which is the goal, successful transfer of value at the end of a project. So I'm hoping the book opens up those truths to a lot of people and then gives them practical tools and the practical considerations they need to go learn later and bring in the experts. A lot of being a professional M&V person at this point is being a team builder. because there's no one going to be sophisticated enough to do everything. It's a specialization. Much of the practical considerations are specializations. So I hope the book helps people understand how to build a team, how to implement M&V, and discuss it, teach it, communicate it with all the parties involved, stakeholders, from policymakers to procurement agents to everyone, such that the jobs are smooth and settlement is successful at the end of the day for everyone. Fewer problems, more engineering and fewer lawyers. That's my statement. I love lawyers, don't get me wrong, but no, more engineering, more just, turning this into a machine and helping it work.
Okay, so that's a great way to finish. I think I will link the book, so the first AEE Press book in the description down below, the role of the measurement and verification professional, judgment and decision making in the application of M&V. Be sure to check it out. And thank you again, Steve, and thank you, Laurie.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Anna.
us.
Yeah, thank you.